Imagine cowboys eating steak and beans every single day. Out on the cattle trails, it was a whole different story. No saloon, no menu. Your plate depended on whatever showed up. Something hunted along the way, fried in whatever grease was left, or cooked in a dented pot. Could be rattlesnake in the skillet, stale bread turned into soup, or even a pie made with vinegar. It was survival food, no leftovers and no luxury. Today I'm showing you 25 real meals from the Old West. Some will gross you out, others will make you hungry, and the next one might surprise you. 1. Panda Compo, the so-called camp bread that tricks you by the name. No soft, fluffy middle. It was a low, firm dough, no charm, made with just flour, lard, salt, and baking powder. Mix it, press it down with the palm of your hand, and it goes straight into the skillet over an open fire until it gets color, or burns if the cookie was having one of those days. On the trail, it became the go-to carb, fast, filling, and tough enough to survive a week crushed in a saddlebag. Cowboys used it to wipe up grease, hold stew, or chew it dry while riding. It didn't sour, didn't crumble, and didn't need refrigeration. And when luck showed up, it got a handful of herbs or a drizzle of bacon grease on top, taking the brute a little closer to real table bread before hitting the trail again. 2. Wagon fried steak. Every so often, in the dust and heat, a steer would limp too much, get sick, or just collapse on the road. Nobody stopped to mourn. Knives went to the belt, because on the trail the rule was simple. If it can't be ridden, it can be eaten. Wagon fried steak was nowhere near tender. It was tough meat, cut in a hurry, tossed into a cast-iron skillet, and fried in tallow until it browned. Salt, if there was any. Pepper, if luck was on your side. If not, it was just fire, meat, and grit. There was almost never flour for breading. The cook made it fast, served it hot, and faced 20 men in line. You hoped nobody cracked a tooth, and at the same time, you felt the mood lift. Something died, but it wasn't you, and the night still had miles ahead. And when the grease started sizzling, everyone leaned in to see what came next. 3. Fried beef liver with onions. Today, hardly anyone picks liver by choice, but out in the open range, it was treasure. When a steer went down, it was one of the first parts the cookie set aside and took straight to the skillet. That's where the show started, eating something that for a minute almost felt fancy. It was quick, truly filling, and packed enough iron to keep the crew on their feet. He sliced it thin, let the grease sizzle, and threw in onions gathered along the way, or from the wagon, if luck helped. The smell rose, meat and smoke with an almost medicinal edge. In your mouth, it was what everyone knows. Strong, kind of creamy, sometimes rubbery. Some asked for seconds, others only tolerated it because it wasn't beans. And after days staring down hard bread and regret, even the picky ones chewed in silence. 4. Oxtail stew. When a steer was butchered, nothing went to waste, and the tail ended up in the pot. On the trail, it was patience food. Open fire, slow simmer for hours until the meat slipped off the bone and the broth reduced, thick enough to stick to your ribs. If potatoes or some wild onions showed up, they went in. If not, it stayed basic, because the flavor came from thyme. The collagen gave it body and a nearly gelatinous texture that made even the toughest cowboy chew slow. Under the stars, it felt like something stolen from a hotel kitchen. It was the kind of dish that quieted the circle. Nobody complained about a hard saddle or stubborn cattle while that broth steamed. You didn't just eat it, You respected it. And when the cook chose to burn wood and hours on it, it meant the day had paid off, and there was still more ahead. 5. Deer or antelope stew. In the wide, unfenced land, beef didn't always make it onto the menu. A lot of times the cattle belonged to a rancher, and mixing up a herd with dinner caused trouble. But game that crossed the trail played by a different rule. If the rifle hit, pronghorn or deer became a meal. The meat came in lean and sometimes firm, but over low heat in a dented pot, it softened little by little. In went onion, leaves found along the way, and, if luck helped, a potato forgotten in a saddlebag. The flavor was stronger than beef, and because it was fresh, it almost felt like luxury after so much salted meat. Besides filling you up, it broke the routine and reminded the cowboy the trail still had surprises. If the cookie could stretch the stew for 2 nights, someone earned another cup of coffee and the best spot by the fire while the pot still bubbled. 6. Potatoes roasted in the ashes. If a cowboy came back from the range without meat, no money or no luck, he went for what was in the ground. Potatoes were cheap, rode in the wagon without spoiling, and held up for weeks on the road. At camp, you just shoved one into the heart of the coals as the fire died down and let time do the work. No pot, no plate. Nearly an hour later, the skin puffed and darkened under the ash. Inside was soft flesh with a smoky taste, like it already had butter. He split it with a pocket knife and threw on salt or a drip of bacon grease if he had it. Some ate the burnt ends and laughed. It felt like home, if home were a fire. When the sun dropped and your body felt heavy from the saddle, that hot potato was worth more than luxury, and it still left the trail open for the next frontier improvisation. 7. Cornmeal dumplings in wild onion broth. When flour ran out in the saddlebag and meat turned into a mirage, the cowboy went with what he had: cornmeal and whatever the woods gave up. First came the broth. Onions picked along the way, a clove of garlic if one showed up, herbs yanked in a hurry, all boiling until it perfumed the camp. Then the stiff dough, water, salt, and a little grease, dropped by spoonfuls into the pot. In the heat, the dumplings puffed up and floated, yellow. It smelled better than the herd after days in the dust, and the warmth made your belt stop biting for a moment. It wasn't saloon food, it was trail food made to shut up hunger and keep your legs steady in the saddle. Every spoonful left a slick of grease on your lip and bought a few more hours of road, because at sunrise the improvising had to start all over again. 8. Scrambled cactus pads. In the desert, where trees were the exception and cactus was the rule, cowboys went for the most available ingredient: the pads of prickly pear, the nopales. Getting close took care, prepping took skill. With a blade, they scraped off the spines or burned them in the fire, then cut the pads into strips. The skillet was already hot, taking onions, lard, and whatever meat had survived the night. For extra strength, in went dried peppers or a handful of beans from the fire. Cowboys weren't picky. If it grew out of the ground and didn't take you down, it was food. It wasn't a saloon dish, but it filled you up and delivered nutrients without anyone doing the math. The texture leaned toward a light slime. The flavor, earthy and spicy, woke your head up. And there was still road ahead, with more improvising waiting at the next stop. 9. When the trail ran near a creek, dinner could take a sharp turn. A hungry cowboy knew how to read the land. Water nearby, a low bank, something dragging a shell. The turtle, slow to escape and rich in protein, was fair game right there under the open sky. Catching it was easy. The challenge started with cleaning it, which took a steady hand and nerves of steel to get through the shell. Then came the skillet. Grease, sizzling, garlic or wild onion if it showed up, and the meat browning. To finish, he tossed in leaves picked from the bank, dandelion, sorrel, watercress, and ate right there with the belt knife. Steam rose, juices ran, the fire popped, and night settled over the field. In town, they said it tasted like swamp. On the road, opinions didn't feed you, and the smell from the pan already pulled your next step forward. 10. Apple and bacon in the skillet. When all that was left at camp was one bruised apple and a chunk of salty bacon, nobody wasted energy complaining. That's when improvising became the rule. The fat did the seasoning, and the fruit came in to cut the salt. The bacon went first, in thick strips, frying until it crackled and curled at the edges. Then came the apples, picked along the road when possible, dried and rehydrated when winter tightened its grip. In the skillet, they sizzled, softened, and browned on the tips, pulling out a sweetness that felt like luxury. If the cook was in a good mood, he dripped in apple vinegar or a pinch of cinnamon, and the dish picked up another layer, setting the night's conversation up to roll on. No plating, no fuss, just spoons, silence, and that sweet, salty contrast that tricks your exhaustion. When the skillet emptied, someone was already asking for the next round. 11. When the fire was dying down and hunger hit, cowboys ran on instinct. They grabbed an ear of corn in the husk and tossed it straight into the hot ash. No water, no butter, just heat and smoke, and a prayer it didn't burn. It wasn't sweet corn. It was field corn, picked nearby or borrowed from some unguarded patch. The husk did the trick. It became a shield, held in steam, and let the coals cook it from the inside. About 10 minutes later, you pulled it out, blew off the ash, and bit in. The kernels popped and sometimes stuck in your teeth. If there was salt, great. If not, you ate it anyway. Some rubbed on animal fat afterward, with a dirty hand and a satisfied grunt. For anyone who hadn't seen anything green in days, those burned husks felt like a prize, and they cleared the way for the next camp improvisation. And the fire still had stories to tell. 12. Split pea soup with fatback wasn't a childhood memory. Out on the range, it was crossing food. Sacks of split peas rode in the saddlebag because they were light, cheap, and could survive weeks getting shaken with sand, sweat, and gunpowder. When hunger hit, the ritual was simple. The peas went into the pot, followed by water from the nearest creek, strained through whatever existed, hat, sock, cloth. In went fatback, a salty strip of cured pork belly, and the fire did the rest. The peas broke down into something between soup and paste. It wasn't fast or pretty, but it held you together and pushed back the cold. If an onion or wild herb showed up, it became luxury. Most of the time it was just that, and the smell of the pot working already told you the night would be a little less harsh for a few minutes. 13. Smoked venison sausage. When cowboys crossed stretches of forest or made deals with local hunters, deer was a sure prize. But turning it into sausage wasn't routine. It was proof someone understood the frontier. The meat was chopped fine, seasoned with sage or juniper found in the brush, and packed into a well-cleaned casing. Then came low fire, steady wood and slow smoke, until it dried to the point it could ride for days in a saddlebag. Instead of hardening like jerky, it kept tenderness and flavor, and it lasted a good while. You could eat it cold, heat it in a skillet, or skewer it straight into the flame. No plate and no long break. One slice handled your hunger on the trail, while the next stop was still just dust on the horizon. Some would cut off a round at a gallop without getting off the horse. In that world, that comfort was worth more than gold. And the saddlebag still hid other surprises. 14. Trail grits, boosted with bacon grease. This wasn't just a southern kitchen thing. Out in the open range, it became an ally, too. The reason is simple. It's light, cooks fast, and fills you up. You just boiled water, tossed in a handful of ground corn, and stirred until it thickened. The real upgrade happened when there was bacon. After frying a few strips, the leftover grease went into the grits pot, bringing salt and a smoky edge. If you were lucky, you sprinkled in a dried herb, but almost everyone just celebrated. At least it wasn't beans again. It clung to the spoon, took little firewood, and with a scrape along the bottom, turned into a hot bowl in the middle of nowhere. And in that quiet of dust and horizon, every spoonful felt like a message from home, getting your stomach ready for whatever came next. And when the pot was empty, camp was already thinking about the next trick. 15. Antelope marrow toast. On the trail, when a cowboy dropped an antelope, the celebration started before the fire was even lit. The meat was welcome, but the prize was in the legs. Bones packed with marrow, concentrated energy to get through days of dust and saddle. With a hatchet or a rock, they split the shin bone, pulled out the pale mass, and let it melt in the skillet until it turned into a golden oil that crackled. Without wasting time, they poured it over toasted sour bread, corn cakes, or even a flattened rock used as a plate. The taste hit deep. Smoke, salt, and fat done right. A survival umami. The older hands said it helped the joints and kept your aim steady. To a rookie, it seemed weird, until the first bite wiped the grimace away, and the next morning he was hunting for another bone because the trail still had a long way to go. 16. Burnt ends and a skillet of leftovers. In the cowboys' world, nothing went to waste, not even the dark crust stuck to the bottom of the pan. After the cookout, whatever was left went back on the fire. Fat trimmings, toasted tips, bacon scraps, stray pieces of beef. It all went into the skillet, sometimes with potato or dried onion, and fried in its own grease until it sizzled and snapped. To soak up the oil, in went crumbs of biscuit or cornbread. It wasn't a planned meal. It was the pan getting cleaned out and hunger getting handled. And the funny thing, those uneven pieces seemed to have more flavor than the whole roast. Some called it scrap hash, others pan sweep. But most of the time it was just dinner, and it vanished fast, like the road was already calling for the next stop. 17. Salted fish on the coals. When the crew crossed a river and the line cooperated, the cowboys' menu changed. Far from water, with no ice and the saddle calling, fresh fish didn't last. So out came coarse salt. Any kind worked: trout, catfish, perch. They gutted it, cleaned it, salted it heavy, and hung it in the wind for a day or two, letting the sun finish the job. Then, firm and cured, the fish went straight onto the coals, pinned on a stick. No plate, no pot. Up close, the crackle of the skin told you when to flip it. It was by eye, not by clock. The skin blistered and darkened, but inside the meat flaked off hot with that strong cured bite. Bones were part of the deal. If a wild lemon or some pepper showed up in the wagon, even better. If not, It was just fire, fish, and hunger, while the night still had road left in it. 18. Wild onions in the coals. On a long crossing, when the plate was almost always beans and dried meat, finding those onions felt like a prize. They grew in clumps near creeks, riverbanks, and grassy fields. A cowboy knew them instantly. Thin stalks, sharp smell, a flavor that hits hard. Picked, they went whole onto a hot rock or straight into the coals until the skin burned and split. Then you peeled off the char and revealed a soft bulb, sweet and smoky. Some ate it plain, others chopped it and threw it into whatever was on the fire, stew, grits, or the leftover scramble in the skillet. It didn't fill you up, but it changed the flavor and made a simple meal feel different. After days of dust and dry bread, that bite brought the town to mind, even miles away, and the camp moved on with a little more energy. 19. Hominy cured with lye. Before canned goods and boxed cereal, corn became a real meal on the trail. To do it, cowboys boiled dried kernels with lye, the same stuff used in soap, and let the chemistry do its work. The hull loosened and the inside became ready to chew. Then came the routine. Rinse it well, put it back in the pot with water and salt, and cook it slow until it thickened. If tallow, bone broth, wild herbs, or a scrap of meat showed up, it went in. Most of the time there was nothing. The result landed somewhere between porridge and stew, tasting like corn and campfire smoke. It was the kind of food that stuck to your ribs and kept a man moving long after coffee, day after day. It didn't bring fame, but it earned respect, and it still left room for the next trick the trail demanded. 20. Dried pumpkin chips. On the road, when meat disappeared and the trail still asked for many more days, cowboys leaned on a simple solution. Thick-skinned pumpkins growing wild on the prairie. No pie. They sliced the flesh very thin, shaved it into strips, and let the sun do the work, on rocks or hanging off the saddle itself. No sugar, no salt, just time and wind. Once dry, it turned into a firm sheet with a subtle sweetness and a good chew. The strips went into sacks or rolled blankets, didn't rot, and could take a beating. It was pocket food, low-key, but able to hold hunger down slowly while the next town was far away. At night, it could go straight into your mouth or come back to life in a thin stew. After days of beans and dust, that light sweetness felt like a reward, and it still made you want to test the next trick. 21. Acorn bread baked by the fire. Flour wasn't always in the saddle or the wagon, so the cowboy learned to look for an answer along the way. If the trail crossed an oak grove, he didn't pass through empty-handed. He gathered acorns and started the ritual. First, crack and shell, then soak or boil for hours, sometimes days, until the water pulled the bitterness out. Only then came the part that truly wore you out, grinding it by hand into rough flour or a paste. He mixed in water and a little animal fat, shaped thick cakes, and set them on a hot rock beside the fire. No yeast, no sugar, just what it took to keep going. It was a dense bread that worked with beans, dipped into stew, or bitten plain when supplies were short. It wasn't made to please. It was made to hold you over until the next water stop, where another improvisation began. 22. Liver steaks on the griddle. When a steer went down on the road, cowboys made sure nothing was wasted, and liver came first. Packed with nutrients and quick to cook, it was fuel for anyone who still had to stay in the saddle. They cut thick pieces, heated a griddle or a greased skillet, and let it sear until the edges started to curl and the smell pulled everyone to the fire. No fuss, a pinch of salt, pepper if there was any, and sometimes a sip of vinegar to tame the iron taste. It cooked in a flash, filled you up before any stew, and gave you that quick burst of energy when time was tight. It could turn a little rubbery, and the flavor hit straight, no warning. With black coffee or dry bread, it reminded you the meal wasn't luxury. It was strategy, and there was still more waiting at the next stop. 23. Roasted prickly pear pads. In the Southwest, where cactus showed up more than cattle, a lot of cowboys learned to live off what the land handed them. The steps were simple. Cut the flat pad, lay the knife down, and scrape off the spines until the surface was clean. Then, fire. The pad went onto the coals, turned slowly until the skin charred and loosened. When you opened it up, out came a vegetable with a smoky smell and a slight tang, soft inside and firm enough to feel like real food. Sometimes they mixed it with beans. Other times they wrapped it in cloth with a piece of meat. Most of the time they ate it right there, pulling it from the coals like camp pumpkin. It wasn't luxury, but it was green, and it brought water. And when the canteen was low and shade disappeared, that pad changed the pace of the trip. And it raised another question. What else was the trail hiding for the next day? 24. Succotash of dried corn and wild onion. This wasn't Grandma's creamy pot. It was the trail version. In the skillet, a chunk of tallow or bacon grease hit the heat with a sizzle, and the onions, picked from the edge of the road, went in first to make it smell right. When they hit the sweet spot, that aroma pulled everyone closer to the fire. The dried corn, kept because it was light, didn't spoil, and fit the supplies, came next after a short soak and a quick boil. Sometimes a handful of greens showed up, or a few black beans hiding in a saddlebag, and the dish went further than it looked like it would. Every stir pulled together smoke, salt, and the corn's sweetness into a flavor that felt like a payoff. Around the fire circle, the talk dropped, spoons scraped the bottom of the pan, and it was already ready to catch the next thing the road turned up. 25. Out on the open range, dessert was almost a rumor. Still, every now and then, the cook pulled a trick out of his sleeve and the whole camp's mood flipped. It was bannock, flat bread made from flour, water, and fat, cooked on a hot rock or a stick, right in the coals. But the real twist came when apples showed up. Dried slices from the trading post or little wild fruit picked along the trail, and a bit of wild sage. The fruit got mashed and worked into the dough, and the chopped sage added an earthy smell. Then it all got flattened, wrapped in cloth or put into the skillet, cooking slow until it browned outside and set in the center. It came out smoky, herbal, sweet in the right amount. For a cowboy, it was like biting into a memory of home, and all it took was someone brushing bacon grease on top for the circle around the fire to squeeze in even tighter. That's the count, partner. 25 meals made out on the open range, the kind that kept cowboys going, full bellies, high spirits, and a little smoke in the hat. No modern utensils or second chances, just a cast iron pot, a campfire, and a steady hand. If this video took you to the Old West, hit like and subscribe to keep riding with us. Turn on the bell, and if you're hungry for more, check out the other episodes. Saloon food, prison dishes, and curious recipes. See you in the next video.